Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Looks like we have our attendees here. So I just want to go ahead and get started. My name is Jason Lau. I'm the Senior Associate Director for Financial Operations here at the University of San Francisco. I would like to thank everyone for joining us this evening and essentially going over how to complete this 2627 FAFSA that just actually got released in its final form yesterday. Along with me, I have my fellow coworker, Lena Lay, who will be monitoring our Q&A tonight and answering some of your questions there. And she is our financial aid manager for compliance and training here. So she will be answering your questions, although I will also answer your questions live at the very end of the presentation, but she will be helping me answer them throughout. So let's go ahead and get started. As I mentioned, today's webinar is about how to complete the 2027 FAFSA, which is the application or financial application we'll use for this upcoming fall 2026, spring 2027 semester. So hopefully at the very end of this presentation, you all will be able to successfully submit your FAFSA. But again, if you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out to the Office of Financial Aid. So we're going to get started. It's quite a bit of slides because we are going over each of the questions that are on the FAFSA. Before we begin, tonight's webinar will be recorded, and this will be available on both the financial website as well as the admissions recording website, which I have provided a QR code right here at the bottom bottom middle side, where you can take your phone's camera and point it at this QR code, and it will take you directly to that website. Please also use the Q&A button on Zoom to ask any questions that you have during the presentation. As I mentioned, Lena will be here to answer your Q&A questions, but I will also answer some of them live at the very end of the presentation. So what we're going to cover today is the 2627 FAFSA updates, what you need to complete your FAFSA, about federal student aid or FSA ID creation, what is a contributor and what do they do? Reviewing the 2627 FAFSA, this is more of a line-by-line review, going over what is a FAFSA submission summary, as well as answering your questions and answers. So that will be our agenda for tonight or this evening for some of you. Here's our current timeline for this FAFSA. So I put today to the end of September because originally that was the plan, but the 2627 FAFSA is open to all students and families to participate in a beta testing. Breaking news, as of yesterday, it did actually officially released. It surprised many of us because the FAFSA doesn't normally release until actually October 1st. So that's what we were expecting, but it did open up yesterday for everyone to be able to complete. So as soon as this evening after this presentation, you can go ahead and get started on your FAFSA if you are ready. If not, no worries, you can wait. For our priority deadline for our EA, early action, early decision students, we do ask for January 15th. Sorry, and I also mistakenly put 25, but it should be 2026. And that is when we can ensure that we can get you your financial offer in time. March 2nd, 2026, and I do apologize for this typo, I should have caught that, would be for our regular decisions and Cal Grant application deadline. So essentially, if you're a regular decisions applicant, that is our recommended timeline or priority deadline, because that also follows the Cal Grant, which is the California State application deadline. So that's essentially the timeline that we have at the moment. All right, so let's go ahead and prepare. What do we need to collect, or how do you submit this FAFSA? So there's mainly two ways to submit. Only one way is what we recommend and the easiest for both you and financial aid and everyone, which is the online FAFSA. And this is the link, which I also provided a QR code at the bottom right corner. So you can take your phone, it'll take you straight to the FAFSA's website. This is the easiest way. We get the FAFSA electronically. Time frame and processing is the quickest way. The other way to submit the FAFSA is called a paper or a PDF FAFSA. With this, you unfortunately have to print it out, mail it, and I've heard it taking 3 to 4 weeks for the paper FAFSA to process. So this is quite lengthy in terms of timeline. So always we recommend online FAFSA. I do understand that there are situations where somebody might have to do a paper FAFSA, and I do understand that, but that will take a little bit longer to process. So what we need to do to prepare. So first, create a studentaid.gov account, otherwise known as the Federal Student Aid ID. This is what you need to log in and sign and complete the FAFSA. Gather the information needed to complete the FAFSA. This is a link, unfortunately, and so hopefully when the presentation is shared and the slides are shared with you all after, you can click on this. Determine who your contributors are, whose information needs to go on your FAFSA besides you, the student. For dependent students, you can use the Who's My FAFSA Parent Wizard tool, which will determine which parent will need to be on the FAFSA. Stay informed and up to date about the 26-27 FAFSA updates. So things have stabilized a little, but in the past year and two, actually, there's been many updates to the FAFSA and financial process. So, but Federal Student Aid is providing updates as they have them regarding the FAFSA. However, you can also follow their social media. They're on all major social media platforms such as X, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And that's the link studentaid.gov announcement where they will post any announcement or changes to the 26-27 FAFSA. Here's kind of what you need. This is gathered document, as I previously mentioned. So again, create that Federal Student Aid ID. You'll be able to use it immediately, unlike in the years past where they do have to wait 1 to 3 days to verify your identity. I think that's one of the changes they made is allowing students and families to use their Federal Student Aid ID as soon as they create it. For your parent or spouse contributor, you will mainly, they will need their social security number, date of birth. You will also need the email address to invite them, and we'll go over a little bit more towards the middle of the presentation, where we'll talk a little bit more about contributor. Social security number, alien registration number, or A number, your tax return for 2024, records of any child support received, your balances in cash saving checkings, net worth of investments, business, and farm. So the Federal Student Aid ID, what really is that? It's an account username and password that you use to log into all Federal Student Aid products, viewing a loan history, completing a FAFSA, signing up for loan repayment options, things like that. Parent and spouse without an SSN is also required to have a Federal Student Aid ID. And this is how you create it. There's the link. Essentially, you're going to provide your personal information, name, date of birth, and social. You have to create a username, email address, a strong password, and provide your mailing address, phone number. So I did put allowed 3 days. One of the changes that they made was allowing it to be used immediately. So that may not be the case anymore of needing to wait 3 days to be able to use it. Now, what happened if you don't remember? So the Federal Student Aid ID or student is basically the same. So if you've ever completed a FAFSA or have another sibling or child that you've completed a FAFSA for, it's the same login information. So if you don't remember it, you can select the option to reset it, reset the password. or verify the email address so that you can access it again. It's the same regardless of which child you completed for, um, or the student. If you're a transfer student and you've completed the FAFSA for another school, you would have another or you have an account already. So who is a contributor? So a contributor is any individual that's required to provide their consent and approval, um, meaning that they're required to provide their information on the student's FAFSA. So if you're a dependent student, this will be your biological or adoptive parents or the parent's spouse if they've remarried. If you are the independent student and you are married, that will be your spouse. There's a tool for dependent students where you can figure out if one parent needs to be on your FAFSA or two parent needs to be on your FAFSA. And that is Who's My FAFSA Parent Wizard. And so this tool is helpful in for you to prepare to know which parent or whether that's one or both that needs to go on your FAFSA. All right, so let's go ahead and get started on completing and working through the FAFSA. So I've started this presentation with talking about the student. However, a lot of these questions are also asked on the parents. So if the parents are required to provide their information, it will be asked on their sides too as well. So I'm going to start with the student, but I'm going to highlight some of the different questions that a parent may get when they complete their portion. So I'll go over both view. So um, keep that in mind. All right, so first it'll take you to the landing page. So if you go to studentaid.gov, it will take you straight to the landing page. You want to be sure that you're completing the FAFSA for the appropriate academic year because currently there is two academic year that we are working with, which is the 25-26 as well as the 26-27. So if you are here for spring 2026, you should be completing the 25-26 FAFSA. But if you are an applicant, you're currently in high school and you're joining us for fall 26 school semester, then you should be completing the 26-27 FAFSA. So keep that in mind. Just know which one you're completing or that you need to complete. Very common for us to get a FAFSA that a student actually completed for the wrong year. And so on this page, you will be directed to either start a new FAFSA, so a brand new blank FAFSA, or edit an existing FAFSA if you started, but maybe now you need to go back and make some changes, then you should then be editing your FAFSA. Next, it will ask the student to log in. So again, this is where the Federal Student Aid ID that you've created comes in. It's going to ask you for your email or username and your password that you created. If you have not set one up yet and you don't have a Federal Student Aid account, go ahead and click create an account, and that will do the same purpose of setting you up for a Federal Student Aid ID. Once you log in, you will have the option to select whether you're the student completing the FAFSA or whether you are the parent completing the FAFSA. Um, if you are a contributor, which I will go over later, you can also enter a code or an invitation code to complete your portion of the student's FAFSA. So in this case, we're the student, we're going to go ahead and select student and continue. You would then be presented with four videos and instructions. One going over what is a FAFSA, the second go over in contributors, right? So and you'll hear this term a lot and kind of sometimes used interchangeably with parents, but contributors essentially just means that they are contributing to the student's FAFSA, right? What to expect, and after submitting the FAFSA form, what's next, right? So it's important that if you're brand new to FAFSA, I highly recommend watching those videos and reading this so that it familiarize yourself with how the FAFSA process kind of works. Then you'll be asked for your state of legal residence. So enter the state and the year. If you are a California resident, this question is important for Cal Grant awarding because Cal Grant is a state-based or a California-based aid, and this is what they go off of. So Next, you'll be asked to provide consent and approval. Why this is important is because the FAFSA allows the functionality um, where all students and parents will have their tax information transferred over from the IRS. So if you filed a tax return for the year 2024, your tax information will automatically be pulled in from the IRS and provided then on the FAFSA, making this process a bit more simple and easy for you. And if you did not file a tax return or you did not earn enough to file a tax return, it will still find that information through the IRS and know that you did not file a tax return or there's no tax return record on file. So all students and contributors are required to accept or approve this consent to be eligible for financial aid or federal student aid. So keep that in mind. Next is going to go through the import. So you'll get a screen saying that it's working to pull that information. In this student example, they did not file a tax return, so therefore it's going to say, sorry, data could not be retrieved. But if you do have a tax return on file with the IRS, then you will see that it's transferred successfully. What happened, or what about students contributor who don't provide consent? Let's say you don't allow the IRS or the FAFSA to pull that IRS information. Unfortunately, like I mentioned, this is a requirement for the student to be eligible for financial aid. But it does give you some warning. So if you say decline or I do not accept, then it does give you two warnings to say, are you sure, right? So you can say, never mind, I'm going to go ahead and provide my approval, or no, I'm not going to. In that case, the student will not be eligible for federal student aid. But that's kind of the process where it's now required versus it's an optional. Next, we'll go over personal information. So it's first going to ask about the marital status. This is the same on the parent side. The student selects their current or parents or contributor selects their current marital status. So if as of today you are single or never married or divorced, right? That's what you would put on this FAFSA is your current status as of the day that you file your FAFSA. Next is going to ask for the student's college or career school plan. So if you are brand new, just graduate from high school, then you would then be a first year freshman. If you are a transfer, then maybe you're a second year or other undergraduate, which is junior and seniors. Um, the other question that it asks on this screen is whether you have completed or earned your first bachelor's degree. So important to read that. Yes means that you have, no means you don't, because this will affect your Pell Grant eligibility because students who already have a bachelor's degree are not eligible for federal Pell Grant. So read those questions carefully. These questions on the personal circumstances, these are actually quite important because this would determine whether a student's dependent or independent, right? So just to quickly define them, dependent essentially requires a contributor or parent information. Independent students do not. So some of these questions, for example, asking whether students, the veterans of the U.S. Armed Forces, at any time since they turned 13, they were an orphan. Those are your legal guardianships, emancipated minor. So if the student answers yes to any of those questions, they are independent. And sometimes verification might be required. So you want to read these carefully. And if none of these apply, go ahead and click none of these applies. And then you could go ahead and continue or move on to the application. So read these carefully. If you meet any of these, go ahead and select it. And if you don't, just click none of these apply. Then it will ask you for other circumstances, specifically on whether the student is a unaccompanied, homeless, or self-supporting and at risk of being homeless. So you would then select yes or no, and it will ask specifically any time on or after July 1st of 2025. And this again is one of those dependency questions again, whether a student's independent or dependent. Next is unusual circumstances. What is unusual circumstance, right? Unusual circumstance is basically a situation that happens to a student where it may prevent them from getting their parents' information. Let's say, based on the previous question, the student is considered dependent, where normally parent information will need to be provided on the FAFSA. Um, if there's a situation that, maybe there's, and I'll quickly go over what some of those situations are that prevent students from getting their parents' information, they might want to select that they do have unusual circumstance. There will be further follow-up with this. And if these situations apply, and these situation could be, the student, they left home due to an abusive or threatening home environment, they are abandoned by their parents, they are refugee or asylee status and are separated from the parents, victim of human trafficking, parents are incarcerated, and any other otherwise unable to contact or locate their parents. So these are kind of a little bit more extreme circumstances. So and usually there's follow-up that's required or an appeal process that's required. So that's why if you do select yes, that you do meet this requirement, that you should contact the Office of Financial for further follow-up. We'll most likely be giving you an appeal that you will submit, and we'll ask for supporting documentations as well. And dependency status. So now it will tell you what that dependency status is, whether you're a dependent or an independent student. And one of the questions here will ask you, if in this example, this student is a dependent student, it will ask if their parents are refusing to provide the information on FAFSA. So you will select yes or no. If you select yes, that the parents refusing to provide their information, then unfortunately you're only eligible for a direct unsubsidized loan. You won't be eligible for any need-based aid, as well as a direct subsidized loan. So keep that in mind. If you do answer yes, that will be the situation that you will encounter, is not being eligible for need-based financial aid. In this example, we'll go ahead and select no, and we will continue. So student demographic, the sex, so there's only two options on the FAFSA, which is male or female. Next, you'll be presented with your race and ethnicity. Once you select an option, it will drop down to show additional ethnicities. And again, keep in mind that this question will not affect your eligibility for financial aid. And this also will not be shared with colleges and universities. Citizenship. So in order for students to be eligible for federal student aid, they will either need to be a US citizen or one of the eligible non-citizens. And so if you are a US citizen, go ahead and select that. If you are one of the eligible non-citizens, then you will be asked to provide your A number or your alien registration number or your permanent resident card number, right? So essentially your A number. If you select neither US citizen nor eligible non-citizen, unfortunately, you are not eligible for federal student aid. If you are, let's say, undocumented or DACA student and you don't have a social security number and you can't, or actually, well, I don't know if you'll get this far into the FAFSA, but for students in that situation, then they may complete a California DREAM Act application or contact financial aid for additional guidance there. But if you select neither US citizen or eligible non-citizen, then you are not eligible for federal aid. We may still use your FAFSA to consider you for need-based financial aid from the institution. Next, it will ask you for your parents' educational status. It will ask that either of your parents or students' parents attend college or complete their complete college. Next, it will ask if your parents were killed in the line of duty from either as an active duty as a member of the U.S. Armed Forces after the events of 9/11, or performing official duties as a public safety officers. And this question is mainly used to determine maximum Pell Grant eligibility. So if you answer yes, you'll be considered, but if no, then it processes Pell Grant as normal. High school completion status. It's important to complete this section. We had a lot of students not complete this or select none of the above. Maybe they were completing the FAFSA when they are still in high school. But keep in mind, this question specifically asks, what is their high school completion status at the beginning of the 26-27 school year? So most high school students, if you are currently in high school, graduate in this upcoming May or June. So therefore, by the time you start the 26-27 school year in August, you would have completed your high school. So in this case, you will select high school diploma, right? So do not, if you're select none of the above, you are not eligible for aid because high school completion is a requirement for federal student aid eligibility. It will then ask you to provide your high school information. Hopefully, you should be able to locate your high school if it is within the United States, that you can locate it through their drop-down option. But there is an option to manually enter, but most students, they should have no problem finding it. The next section will go over your finances. So some of these questions are very similar on the parent side as well, and I'll try to highlight some of those. Okay, so for students' taxes, it will ask if they filed a tax return. They will select yes or no. If IRS information was pulled, so remember in the beginning where it pulled in IRS data and brings it into the FAFSA, then some of these questions may not be asked. So I'm putting out there as somebody that was not able to transfer any information from the IRS, and now they have to manually enter it. But if you've already have your taxes transferred, some of these questions again will not be asked. Um, Please be sure to have your 24 tax return. Hopefully, most of you should have them filed by now, but have them ready just in case you need to manually enter some of that information from the tax return. Next, it will ask for assets. So asset information on the student side will only ask for their current values of their cash savings or checkings account, their net worth of investments, including real estate, and net worth of business and farms. On the parent contributor side, there's another question that will ask if they receive child support payments. So child support starting 2 years ago is now part of assets. So you will need some kind of records and assets in terms of investments. Make sure you do not include the primary home that you live in, right? If you have a secondary home, vacation home, things like that, then you will account for that. And then for business, you normally don't include family business with 100 or fewer employees. And the way you calculate your net your investments or sorry your any real estate, for example, would be or business is taking the value minus any debt that you owe on it, and that is the net worth. Next, you'll select your college. Selecting the college is important because only the schools or colleges that you enter here will receive a copy of your FAFSA. So if you do not include them, they will not get a copy. You can add up to 20 schools to the section. So previously it used to be 10, but now it's 20. So hopefully any schools that you're interested in attending or that you possibly may attend for this upcoming school year, go ahead and include them. If you have 30 schools to add, what do? Recommendation there is if you have more than 20 school is to wait for the schools to the first 20 schools to receive your FAFSA. And if you know there are schools that you're not going to be attending, then take them off, and now you can add additional schools to get your FAFSA. Do write this down. The University of San Francisco school code on the FAFSA is 001325. And this is important, or it will help you in terms of entering the school on the FAFSA. So There's a slightly hidden in the screenshot is an area for you to enter the school code. You would put 001325, do a search, and it'll be the only school that pulls up. Otherwise, you'll have to sort through all the schools in the state of California to find the University of San Francisco. If you do that option, do read carefully in terms of the other surrounding schools in San Francisco, where some schools may share a very similar name. So just make sure that you locate University of San Francisco, and putting in the school code will help with that confusion. Then you'll be presented with an overview of the schools that you have added to your FAFSA. So double check the schools that you want are included. If you have not added all your schools, you can click previous, and then you could go back and add additional schools. Once you've added all the schools or up to 20, then you can proceed with the FAFSA. All right, so next we'll go over inviting a parent as a contributor on the FAFSA. What does that process look like? So all the students, so this step has actually simplified a lot since last year. So if you're a parent and you've done a FAFSA for another child of yours that is currently in college, this process is a lot simple. It used to be that you have to provide all sort of information and there's matching issues, etc. This coming year, it's all simplified. You only need your parents or contributors' email address. And then you will be and then be able to send that invite. And I'll show you what the parent side, what the email looks like that they receive. But this makes it so much easier for students now to add their contributors. Now we're at the very end on the student side. They will now be presented with a review page. The review page is a summary of all the answers they provided on all the questions that were asked on the FAFSA. So it's important now to expand these items and go through each of those answers to make sure that they are inputted correctly by the student, right? So if there's any changes or typos, things like that, you can actually click on that section and we'll bring you back to that section so that you can make those corrections. Once you've verified that all the information is accurate and correct, you can then click continue. And now you're presented with the final page, I will say, which is the signature page. So the signature page has terms and conditions, acknowledgement that you will have to read in applying for federal student aid, and also to sign that you are ensuring that the FAFSA is true and accurate, right? So it's very simple. If you're logged in with your federal student ID, that is your verification. And all you do is check a box down here at the bottom that says, I, and then the student's name, agree to the terms outlined above, and then click this button here to sign the FAFSA. Once the student signs the FAFSA, is technically, if you're a dependent student, the FAFSA is not really complete yet. You just completed your portion of the FAFSA. So if you are asked to invite a contributor or your parents, your FAFSA is not completed until their part is completed. So keep that in mind. It will say that it's not processed, but it's just that there's missing pieces to your FAFSA to have a full and completed FAFSA. So all right, and so now you're at the very end, you will be presented with a submission page. This submission summary page lets you know the status of your FAFSA. In this case, remember we said that the contributor hasn't completed their portion. It will say pending submission, right? You will also be able to manage your invites that you send to the contributor. So if, let's say you put a contributor and you're like, this is not the right email that I want it to send to, you can actually edit it. You can manage it. You can invite somebody and invite them again. I think a situation where you might do that is that you may be possibly using a different email address for the parent. On here, you will also be able to view and track the status of your FAFSA. So you'll be able to see whether your parent contributor has completed their portion of the FAFSA to have a successful FAFSA. And so this is where you will also be able to track that. Now we're going to the parent's view, the contributor view. There's only a few slides that's not as lengthy as the student side, so hopefully this part will go a little bit more quick. So on the contributor side, they will, when the student sends that invite, the parent will also then receive an email stating that your student started their FAFSA and they need your portion or your information to be able to complete their FAFSA. So there is an accept invitation button in that email. And if you click that, it will take you to the FAFSA page where you need to complete your information. Do note the code here. I think they call it invitation code. So do note that if you need to manually enter it. For the most part, if you use this button here where it says accept invite, if you use that, that code, the invitation code should automatically be filled in. If not, you can copy and paste this, not really case sensitive. So just copy and paste it and it will do the same thing. I think the great thing about this is that it allows your information to match the student's information. I think in the past there were some problems with matching FAFSAs, who's who, right, kind of deal. So this should eliminate some of those issues that were present in the past. The parent will also be provided with the same consent and approval. Again, this is used to provide consent also for the FAFSA to pull the information from the IRS, so your tax information from the IRS. If you do not, again, provide that consent or approve it, the student will be ineligible for student aid. So mostly, the tax information, I think also makes things easier for you as the parent when you're completing the student's FAFSA, if you don't need to manually enter all these information, like figure out where on the tax return I need to pull that information. So I think it's a great thing to be able to now for FAFSA to communicate with IRS. So with the parent's marital status, again, as I mentioned in the student section, is that it is the marital status as of today. So meaning today, as in, when the FAFSA is filed, when you submit the FAFSA, what is your current marital status? There will also be a section asking about your federal benefits that you receive, such as FHA, which is the Federal Housing Assistance, Medicaid, SSI, TANF, WIC, right? Answering these questions will not reduce a student's eligibility for federal student aid, nor reduce your eligibility for any of the programs that you're on. It's simply for calculating your student aid index or calculating a student's financial eligibility, but it will not reduce your benefit because of your answers to these questions. Next, it will ask for your family size. So the family size, the FAFSA pulls from the IRS pretty much. Essentially, it goes, it identifies whether the parent filed as married or separate, and then also how many dependents are on the FAFSA, on the tax return for that year in 2024. And it will allow you to answer, if there's a change to your family size, maybe that the IRS did not capture in the tax return, where if you say yes, there's a change, then it will allow you to manually enter your family size. So you want to ensure that this is correct because it will affect student aid eligibility. So if you're not sure, if you say you have changes, then you'll be able to see what FAFSA has for your family size, and then you can update it from there. Now, who is in the family size, right? So if you're a dependent student, that will be your parent or parents. Any siblings or children that your parents provides financial support for, as well as any other dependents that your parents provide at least 50% or half of their financial support between July 1st, 2026 and June 30th, 2027. So sometimes and they will have to live with them as well. So sometimes parents also takes care of maybe their retired parents or your grandparents, and so they might also need to be included. So, but the important part is that they are children or the other dependents who lives with the parent and receive half of their financial support, more than half actually. So 51%. If you have another child, and I'm speaking on as a parent, if you have another child that is currently in college that's not living at home, feel free to include them into this family size. And so that's kind of how you would come up with this number. It will also ask for the number in college. This really doesn't impact financial aid. I think this is more maybe statistical based, but the number that you have in college. So if your student is the only one that's in college, should be one. If you have another child that's also in college, then it might be two or three, right? All right. So for the other parent, let's say the parents are married, um, or maybe the parents are unmarried, but they are living together, right? Then, or the other scenario would be if the parents are married, but they filed a separate tax return, then the parent will also need to invite their spouse or the other parent to also contribute their information to the FAFSA. However, if you are married and you filed a married filing joint return and the IRS pulled that or the FAFSA pulled that information from the IRS, then you would not be asked to provide invite your spouse to complete their portion. All you need is their basic information, like their date of birth, etc. But in those scenarios where the parents filed a separate tax return, um, unmarried living together, uh, then you will also then need to invite, and they will do the same exact thing as we just talked about. The contributor will also get their confirmation page similar to the students, basically giving a status of where the FAFSA is at the moment. And so remember previously I had mentioned when the student completes their portion, it's incomplete because it's missing a contributor. Um, if now the parent contributor completes their portion of FAFSA, it is now considered successfully completed, with one exception. If the parent is also required to invite their spouse or the other parent to complete their portion, now it's still incomplete until that second parent or contributor also completes their portion. So do follow the status. You want to make sure that you get the message that the FAFSA form is complete, and that's how you know that the FAFSA is now submitted and processed or will be processed. Similar to a student, you can view the status so you can track the student's FAFSA or the students can track their own FAFSA. I believe the student might also get an email, might be wrong, that the FAFSA is complete once their contributor provides their information. Okay. Now we're towards the very end. So the FAFSA submission summary, what is that? So when a student logs into their FAFSA or studentaid.gov account, they can access their FAFSA submission summary. The FAFSA submission summary is important because it highlights some information or information that you should know. For example, eligibility overview, which gives an estimate of the Pell Grant or federal loans or work study a student might be eligible for. Um, but ultimately, when the school gets your FAFSA, like USF, when we get your FAFSA, we will then take that information and review for federal aid eligibility, state aid eligibility, and institutional aid eligibility. You can also review the FAFSA form answers, review the school information, the schools that you've included on the FAFSA, as well as next steps. Is there any next steps or missing items on your FAFSA that you will need to resolve, right? So if you see anything there, take a look at it. If you're not sure what it is or how to resolve it, feel free to give us a call or email, and we're happy to help you. This will also display your student aid index or SAI. This is to basically determine the financial need of your family and the need-based financial aid eligibility. This does not represent a number or an amount that you'll be paying. It is simply an index or a number that we use to determine need-based aid. You'll also be able to see when your FAFSA was reviewed and processed. Most FAFSAs, I think once you submit it, takes about 1 to 3 days to process, or is actually pretty quick. So you'll get an email once that is done. You can also print or save a copy of this FAFSA submission summary for your records. However, you should also be able to access this whenever you log into your studentaid.gov account. And with that, congratulations. You have now successfully submitted or completed your 26-27 FAFSA. So hopefully this makes it easy. I try to review as much of the line items and some of the common issues that we're seeing on students' FAFSA. So we hope to highlight some of those. But if you have any questions completing your FAFSA, we are happy to help. But if you have technical issues, so questions or issues that you have out that on the FAFSA form that's really out of our control, you have the Federal Student Aid Information Center as your resource. They are available via phone, email, live chat, as well as their, I think the website where you can put in information, they'll reach out to you, such kind of situation. But this for more technical issues with the FAFSA form. It went through beta, so you shouldn't have too many technical questions, but who knows? Maybe there might be one or two that is not known, but they are a resource for you. In addition, we in the financial office at the University of San Francisco is also another resource. We can help you if you are stuck on a question or not sure how to answer a specific question on the FAFSA. Our financial staff is there to help you. We are available by phone. We are also available by email, as well as in person here in Lone Mountain, Main, room 203. So if you're ever here on a campus visit, we should also be here unless it's a Saturday or a Sunday. We should be here, and our staff here in person can also assist you. If you just want to sit down with us to complete a FAFSA, feel free to bring your laptop. We're happy to have you sit down at a table and help and guide you through completing the FAFSA. And with that, that wraps up our slides that we have on the FAFSA. So I do hope that everyone picks up some helpful information. If not, hopefully this now gives you a little bit more, makes you a little bit more comfortable with completing your FAFSA and knowing what some of those questions are and knowing what your resources are. So I will open up. I know Lena has been helping me with answering a lot of your questions, actually. And so I will answer some of them live, especially the questions that are coming in that multiple people are asking for. But so feel free to stick around for this Q&A session. It'll be about 10 minutes or so. But if you have your questions answered, and you can feel free to hop off. Again, this recording and webinar will be recorded and is recorded. And I believe the admissions office will be sending a copy of the link as well as the PDF guide. Sorry, I'm going to go back to the very beginning with that QR code. There you go. With the link to access this. So they're usually pretty quick to make it live on the website. I think within a week, it will be available. If you need to reference this as you're completing your FAFSA, I think it's a great tool to have. So with that, thank you very much for joining us. And now we're going to hop onto this Q&A session. And if you have any questions, please drop them into the questions and answer or Q&A feature here on Zoom. And then we will get to them as quickly as possible. All right, so at the beginning, we do have a question on beta testing, if that allows you to fill out the FAFSA or application sooner. So technically, yes, it did. But as I mentioned, it is no longer in a beta testing phase. It actually went live as of yesterday. Yeah, as of yesterday. And so if you haven't completed one yet, go ahead and do so. It is the final version now. But if the beta version, I think, was released a few weeks ago. So yes, if you choose to participate, you would have been able to submit it earlier. But don't worry if you haven't, it doesn't get you more aid if you participate, or if you choose not to participate, you will still get the same type of financial aid. What if my parents have filed for a tax extension? So with the 24 taxes, what would I use for financial section? I think my recommendation there would be, one, I think, if you select that didn't file, I think you can manually enter income information. But if you're required to file and you earn enough to file, that may delay financially from making decisions, because maybe your file is still incomplete because of that. Um, I think my suggestion would be to have it filed as soon as possible, because FAFSA moved on to using prior year tax information, meaning 2 years before, where most parents and students would have filed their tax return, to just make it easier, right? Um, and if they have a tax extension, I will probably see if they can file it sooner, and so that you can submit your FAFSA. So even though the FAFSA is open now, or technically supposed to be on October 1st, you can actually wait a little bit to complete your FAFSA. You don't have to complete it right away. Okay, I think this is a great question. I think this might actually, a few families might experience this. For divorced couples or divorced parents, one parent only completes the FAFSA form. Does the other parent also need to send in their financial information? So I am speaking specifically on the FAFSA, because I know there's also another application that USF doesn't use, which is the CSS profile. There's some school that does use that, and that's a different situation. But with the FAFSA specifically, if the parents are divorced, and you complete the file as divorced, then the parent that goes on the FAFSA will be the parent, not that the student lives with, but the parent that provides the most financial support to the student, right? So that parent should be a contributor. Otherwise, the other parent information will not be asked. They will not be asked to contribute their financial information. If the parents divorced and now they've remarried, then as I said earlier, it'll be the parent and their remarried or their new spouse or the student's step parent, right? But otherwise, if the parents are divorced, the parent that provides the most financial support will go on the FAFSA. When starting the FAFSA, can we reuse the old form information, or do we have to start a new one? I'm guessing you may have completed one in previous year, where you can renew your FAFSA, where it does bring in some of your previously um, answered question, or sorry, previous demographic, mainly demographic information. But I think for the most part, like if you go in for your first time for the first year, it doesn't bring in a whole lot of information, because you have to, tax years change, and um, IRS has new information, your situation changed. So a lot of it, you will be completing it pretty much new. What steps should a student take to maximize their chances of getting the best financial aid package or scholarship? For example, do I just need to apply and submit the FAFSA CSS, or are there other strategies? I think, maybe this might differ from school to school, but I think with with speaking from the University of San Francisco, as long as you submit your FAFSA, again, we don't, we don't collect the CSS profile. We don't ask students to submit one, but for the FAFSA, as long as you submit it by the priority deadline, as I mentioned earlier, we will consider you for federal, state, and institutional aid. So, whether you complete the FAFSA on October 1st or December 1st, you will still get the same aid package from us and from the federal government. So, to maximize your aid, some schools might be the earlier you do it, the more aid you get, right? And I'm speaking on for other schools, but um, complete FAFSA early, so that, if you are applying for outside or external scholarship and they need to determine your financial need, submitting the FAFSA early will help you be able to submit those applications for external scholarships. What if it's a 50-50 financial support by the divorced parents? If it's truly, I mean, if there is a situation where it's truly 50-50, I think this is referring to divorced parents, then the student may then, as a next condition, would be who do they live with the most. So that's how I would answer that. I think this is a great question. So does the tax file have to be U.S. tax, or can it be a tax of another country? So if the parents contributor lives in a foreign country and they file their own taxes in a foreign country, obviously by doing the consent approval to transfer IRS information, obviously there will be no information with the IRS. And so the tax information would have to be manually entered. There will be questions on the FAFSA asking if a foreign tax return was filed. If so, then you'll just have to manually enter those information. So that is going to be a very manual process if you filed a foreign tax return in another country. But you do want to make sure you have those tax records with you so that you're prepared to complete that portion. So I do still see quite a bit of good questions here actually, and I don't think I have enough time to get through all of them. So I think I'll have time for maybe one more question, but if I am unable to get to your question today, feel free to email or contact the Office of Financial Aid, and we will be happy to answer them for you. And there's a contact information for you. I think I see a couple asset questions, so I'll try to combine some of these asset questions. So the student enters the parent asset, that is a no. So the student only enters their asset when it's on the student portion, and then the parent will answer their own asset questions when the parent completes their portion of the FAFSA. If the student has no assets, like a high school kid with no job, that would be all zero, and that is correct. So if the student has no money in a checking savings account, they have no investments, they have no business, things like that, then yes, correct. You would put all zeros to that question. Um, so I think we're at time. So unfortunately, and I do truly enjoy being here with you today, and I do want to thank you for your time in joining me this evening to learn more about this FAFSA process. As I mentioned, if I did not get to your questions today, or if Lena did get to your questions in the chat, feel free to send them to us via email or give us a call tomorrow morning, and we'll be happy to answer them. But thank you for your time and joining me for today's presentation. I hope everyone have a good evening.